Welcome back to America Decides. It's great to have you with us. The start of President Trump's second term, the rapidly developing tech space is drawing parallels in the minds of some to the Gilded Age. That term, Gilded Age, coined by Mark Twain in a very famous novel. It refers to a period of time from the late 19th to early 20th century where the United States saw, among other things, rapid industrialization, economic growth, and those things intertwined with political corruption and wealth inequality. H.W. Brands joins me now. He is a historian and author of several books, including a great one, American Colossus, The Triumph of Capitalism, 1865 to 1900. Bill, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining us. Is this a second Gilded Age in American history?
It is a second Gilded Age. There are a lot of similarities. So there's rapidly changing technology. There's a growth in wealth inequality and the emergence of a class of extremely rich people. There are some differences, though, and the differences reflect a couple of things. One is that the government of the United States is very much larger today than it was back then. So there was very much less interest on the part of the oligarchs of the day to lobby government. They weren't looking for government contracts the way the oligarchs today are. And political influence was concentrated in Congress then rather than in the executive. So there was nothing like what we saw on Inauguration Day, where there are several of the wealthiest men in America lined up right behind the president while he's taking his inaugural oath. There was nothing like that. If anything, they would have focused their efforts on the Senate, especially, and the House of Representatives.
I want to play you something from that inaugural address that President Trump gave inside the Capitol Rotunda using the words manifest destiny. Tech, please play that.
The United States will once again consider itself a growing nation, one that increases our wealth, expands our territory, builds our cities, raises our expectations, and carries our flag into new and beautiful horizons. And we will pursue our manifest destiny into the stars, launching American astronauts to plant the stars and stripes on the planet Mars.
Expansionism, that's a long-running American theme. Not quite Mars, but that's a new component of it. But the idea of an endlessly expanding America, that is part of Gilded Age sensibilities, is it not?
So the term manifest destiny originated before the Civil War, at the time of the greatest territorial expansion. Now, America's territorial expansion largely stopped by the beginning of the Gilded Age with the purchase of Alaska in 1867. It focused on other things. And for Donald Trump to revive it and speak of taking America's manifest destiny to the stars, that's mighty ambitious. And he's sort of speaking not only for the United States apparently here, but he's speaking presumably for the human race in heading into outer space.
And Bill, it's also something that occurs to me comparing these two times. The Gilded Age not only had all the economics we've talked about, the technology, industrialization, but it was disruptive to people's sense of where they stood in relation to the economy that they once knew, where they stood in relationship to politics. That's very consistent with the way people feel now.
That's definitely true. So the Gilded Age brought in rapid changes in technology, the urbanization of America, for example, in the first Gilded Age of the late 19th century. More and more people were living in cities, and cities seemed to very many Americans to be almost foreign places, including the fact that they were occupied by increasing numbers of foreign immigrants. So there's that aspect. Now, there's another striking difference, and that is that America's first populist party, so-called, emerged during the Gilded Age. But it was a populist party that was railing against the billionaires. Now, populists, American populism such as it is, elected a billionaire president. And this billionaire president is in league with the other billionaires. So populism seemed to be anti the new wealthy class back then. If anything, it seems to be in favor of the new wealthy class today.
Here's another point of contrast I'd like you to evaluate, Bill. So the answer to what were perceived politically as the ravages or the excesses of the Gilded Age was progressivism, and a sense that there needed to be a strong federal civil service, no patronage, experts marshaling the forces of expertise to make for a better government, federal and state. The answer to it now is no, no, no. That's all gotten too big. It needs to be dismantled. Maybe things thrown back to the state, or maybe dismantled entirely. That seems to me to be a rather substantial contrast.
It is a contrast if we think of the Gilded Age, let's say, circa 1890, before populism really took hold, before the progressive movement matured. So who knows what politics in the United States is going to look like 10 years from now? Maybe Donald Trump will bring in a new era of progressivism when Americans realize, oh, you know, there's stuff the government did for us that we kind of liked. Let's bring that back instead of dismantling it.
What about this idea of renaming Mount McKinley, calling the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America, and relitigating the Panama Canal?
Well, the Panama Canal issue is one that will really throw the United States right back into that era if the government of the United States follows through, because it was during the Gilded Age under the presidency of Theodore Roosevelt that the United States wrested control of the Panama Canal from Panama, which was wrested from Colombia, the country from which it seceded. And it was the high age of imperialism. There's a big difference here, that in the 1890s, in the early 1900s, it was sort of accepted that powerful countries, the European powers, the United States, would seize colonies. And that's kind of the way it was. If the United States reverted to that form now, it would go counter to what the vast consensus of thinking in the world is. Europe gave up its colonies. You know, colonies are gone, and now President Trump is talking about creating the equivalent of that again. It would certainly erode America's ability to criticize Russia and Ukraine for trying to take back territory that Russia once thought was his. It would erode America's ability to criticize China for trying to gain control of Taiwan. That is really going to be a stretch to pull that one off.
A stretch indeed. H.W. Brands, always a pleasure, sir. Thank you.
My pleasure.